These are the craziest inventions from the past, the most questionable and horrific contraptions. And we're starting with a device that looks like it is straight out of Saw. You're probably wondering, what on earth is this and why the hell was it even made? This right here is a beauty measure. With 325 screws, you can nudge those metal bars to precisely measure your face. The inventors had two goals in mind. One, making sure your nose and forehead are the same height, and two, determining if your eyes are spaced out just right, like the width of one eye apart. And if it spots anything off, that means that you, yes you, are ugly. Okay, so no, not exactly, but if the device did find an imperfection on your face, it would show you where to apply makeup to enhance or subdue the feature. There was one major problem. The device was not accurate. And while it didn't seem to harm anyone physically, its predictions were about as reliable as flipping a coin, since the so-called perfect proportions were based on inventor Max Factor Sr.'s opinion, rather than any scientific benchmark. So getting labeled ugly by the device just meant that your face didn't quite fit his mold. Some folks did find this ridiculous, of course, and one article in 1935 called it a contraption that looks like an instrument of torture. But somehow the guys from Hollywood still found it pretty handy in helping actors look perfect on screen. But if you think that invention was nuts, you definitely need to see the next one. In the 1930s, parents from all over the US were very open to using bizarre tricks to keep their kids healthy, like this massive rimless Ferris wheel. Parents would need a pretty large nursery to store this clunky equipment and a crib, whereas the baby would need to lie under the wheel in a cot to kick each of the spokes as they spin around. But what even is the point of this thing? Well, apparently this thing builds strong leg muscles, helps them learn how to crawl, and most importantly, keeps the baby quiet. Yep, that little kid would soon grow up to be the famous Usain Bolt. But strong legs don't make infants immune to getting sick. So to keep babies healthy in the 19th century, physicians like Dr. Luther Holt advised all parents to just simply place their infant's basket near an open window. Now, according to them, if babies were exposed to cold weather or given cold baths, it would make them less likely to get sick with minor illnesses. But of course, some parents took it a step beyond our imagination. Eleanor Roosevelt, who by her own admission knew nothing about handling or feeding a baby, bought a chicken wire cage after the birth of her daughter and hung it out of the window of her New York City apartment. The cages were designed to be securely attached to the window ledge or balcony, allowing the baby to play or nap safely while being exposed to the outdoor environment. This seems absolutely insane, and it was, and as the popularity of urban baby cages thankfully declined after the 1930s, another bizarre invention entered the scene. See, in 1963, Japan had the same problem as modern-day hip-hop. It was filled with rats. So, in order to solve that problem, they came up with the weirdest idea of all time. They realized that if they wanted to get rid of the rats, they needed a cat. Shocker, right? But they didn't want to take care of a little four-legged brat with constant mood swings. So the cat mew machine was born. It had a black plastic cat head mounted on a base, and when plugged into a power circuit, the cat's eyes lit up to enhance the spookiness. But what does it do exactly? It scares the rodents away by making cat noises, and it produces several meows per minute. The idea here was to create the impression that a cat is present, which was intended to scare just the rodents. But we seriously bet that thing scared away more than just the rats. It also scared away our appetite, which is ironic because someone over in California thought that overeating was such a major problem that they created the anti-eating mask. As per the patent, it was invented by Lucy Barmby. And the reason this was made was to stop chefs, cooks, and restaurant workers from eating too much on the job. Imagine having a bowl-shaped cage made of stiff wires wrapped around your mouth. Romantic. It does allow you to breathe and talk, but the holes are too small to fit food in. The cage locks with a padlock, so you can't take it off yourself, but in case of an emergency, someone can cut the strap and set you free. We bet the food industry loved that one, but not as much as the world loves chocolate. In the 1930s, a new chocolatey goodness could have put Willy Wonka out of business. When the German manufacturer Berk and Braun were thinking of ways to come up with the next big thing, they stumbled upon the idea of making chocolates. But not just any ordinary chocolates. Each of their chocolates contained a secret ingredient, one that would make people look and feel younger. Berk and Braun had literally invented a chocolate fountain of youth. These chocolates were to die for. No, literally. because it turned out the secret ingredient was radium, a radioactive substance which, if consumed, can cause severe health issues, including fractured teeth, anemia, cataracts, and even bone cancer. But honestly, how could anyone think that using a radioactive substance to make food was a good idea in the first place? You see, at the time, radium was a common ingredient in many products, from cosmetics to cigarettes, as the effects of radiation exposure were not really yet well understood. In fact, radium was often associated with magical healing properties. However, as the hazards of radium were becoming better understood during that time, the company was likely aware of the potential risks. Nevertheless, the chocolate was still marketed to consumers as a health product, and its advertising campaign promoted it as having rejuvenation power. They even called it the radium chocolade. Needless to say, the chocolate was only on the market for 5 years before consumers started to realize that they were not experiencing the promised benefits and were actually suffering from its effects. So radium chocolade, well, it was discontinued. But this wouldn't be the only time people were bamboozled into putting bad things into their mouth. See, in the early 20th century, the Dormad toothpaste was one of the most popular brands, and it was considered a milestone of technical achievement. It was called a modern wonder. Dormad toothpaste claimed that its ingredients improved the defense of teeth and gums and hindered the bacteria in their destroying effect. However, what most people didn't realize is that much like radium chocolade, this toothpaste also contained radioactive materials. So not only were all of the toothpaste claims invalid, but the long-term effects were the polar opposite. But everything got even crazier in the 1930s when Dr. J.A. Purvis made this abomination. The Dynasphere was a big hollow ball on a track, kind of like a hamster wheel, but for people. Okay, it may not be the prettiest thing we've ever laid eyes on, but it is actually quite impressive. You control it just like a car with pedals and a steering wheel. But wouldn't your vision be obstructed? Well, lucky for you, the exterior of the sphere spins so fast that you only see the country that you're driving through. Speaking from a hamster's point of view, I would be very happy owning one of these. The Dynasphere may not have been perfect, but back then, folks were trying everything to come up with new forms of transportation, even horses running on treadmills. Yeah, no, you heard that right. An Italian inventor named Clemente Massarano wanted to push the limits of speed, and at first his focus was on making horses run faster. But after many failed attempts, he realized he had been thinking about things all wrong. And just like that, the Impulsoria was born. It was a transportation vehicle powered by horses walking on a treadmill. The treadmill pulled the chains and gears that would make the wheels turn. But the cool part, thanks to these gears, Massarano achieved his goal. The vehicle could go faster than the horses could go on their own and for longer. Plus, it could go forwards and backwards. You could even stop the vehicle while the horses kept walking on the treadmill. During a test run, a 2-horse Impulsoria pulling a wagon traveled at about 7 miles per hour on average and could reach speeds up to 20 miles per hour, even faster than a steam engine. At the time, that was a lot of horsepower, huh? Okay, but unlike the Impulsoria, not every invention is made for the sake of innovation, as this next one was purely made for the sake of torture. The Spanish Inquisition was notorious for using cruel methods for punishing people, and this device was just one of the many brutal devices used during that time. It was built from 2 spiked wood blocks with a screw at the back, and was clamped on the front and the back of the knee. The victim's knee was placed between the 2 spiked blocks, and the screws were slowly tightened, causing severe injuries and rendering the knees useless. Despite it being called the knee splitter, it was actually used on not just the knees, but any limb that it could fit around. It was used to extract confessions, punish individuals deemed guilty of crimes, and to instill fear in the people. Kind of like the time sociologist Mike Thompson tried to punish his community with a horrible invention. In the early 21st century, the world faced a serious energy problem. Most of the sources of energy were based on fossil fuels, which caused pollution, climate change, and environmental damage. Many people were unaware of the true cost of their energy consumption and wasted electricity without even thinking about the consequences. Enter Mike Thompson, a designer and sociologist, wanted to raise awareness about the value of energy and the impact of wasting it. So he created a blood lamp, which, as its name suggests, generates light from human blood. The lamp is a sealed glass flask that contains luminol, a chemical that reacts with the iron in blood and produces a blue glow. To activate the lamp, you have to break the neck of the flask and cut your finger with the sharp edge. Then you have to drop your blood into the liquid and shake it to mix it with the luminol, and then the lamp will light up for a few minutes until the chemical reaction finally stops. Even if you could make a case for this lamp, there's absolutely no way to defend the Scold's Bridle, which was both horrifying and inhumane. From the 16th to the 19th century in places like the British Isles, women who were seen as too loud or troublesome were punished with this thing. It was a headpiece made of iron, opened by hinges at the side to enclose the head, with a curb plate that was slid into the mouth and pressed down on top of the tongue to prevent them from speaking. Some versions of it even had an iron plate with spikes, causing severe injuries if the wearer tried to speak. They even had to wear a bell so that everyone knew they were being punished. I don't know about you, but maybe some inventions are better off left in the past.